Well, I think we're ready to podcast now.
Excellent. Podcast on.
Thanks for your patience.
My pleasure.
Everybody, for everybody watching, we had an interruption with the brand new hats.
Yes.
So, shameless plug on the new hats.
Nice hats.
Audio issue. Now we've got a huge rainstorm going on, but we're here.
Bring it on.
Making it happen.
We're making it
the
happen.
guest of the hour, everybody. Dr. Barb Hughson, and I got to tell you, I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Me too.
I got to meet you at the SBDC conference.
Yes.
And I got to sit in on your session, your breakout session, which I'll just share with you. It was at the end of the day, and I'm an extrovert, like I'm a big energy guy, but I get conferenced out.
Oh, like everybody does.
Those 4 people. I don't remember what time yours was, but the last session of the day, and it's usually like a slugfest for me to sit through those. And you re-energized me. You got us pumped up, and for you to do that at the end of a long. At the end of a long conference day says something. So all of that to say, I'm super excited to get to chat with you.
Thank you.
For everybody listening, Dr. Barb is you're an author. Mm-hmm. You're a entrepreneur, small business owner.
Yes.
You're a leadership coach, leadership consultant. You even have some cool stuff. I told you I was digging into your website a little bit, but you even have, I'm going to butcher the term now, but like teen leadership stuff.
Yes.
I mean, it's a wide breadth of services and all of that. So I'm super excited, and I really enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you
too. So anyway, thank you so much for being here, and I'm excited to dive in. Where I want to start, if you're cool with it, is a little bit of your background.
Sure.
Kind of walk me through. I definitely want to deep dive into the book and the whole leadership thing and all of that stuff. But before we do, how did we get here? Walk me through your background and. I mean, how did you get to the point where you've got a book published and, all of this stuff?
Yes.
Give me the background.
Yeah. So I always knew I wanted to work with people when I was really young. And when I went off to college, I couldn't figure out exactly what I wanted to do. I actually thought I started out as a math major, believe it or not, because I loved math. And then I shifted gears into psychology, and then I went into like the neuroscience program, which I thought was really cool because I really wanted to understand the brain. And the other thing some people don't know is that I have a strong background in dance. So I danced for 20-some years. I actually have a master's in dance.
No way.
Yeah. So I wanted to do a lot of the creative therapies. I decided I wanted to be a therapist. So that's really how it started. And so I ended up doing a dance program, and I wove that into a therapy practice. And I added art therapy, music therapy. I'm also a musician, dance movement therapy, use of books, all sorts of different modalities. And I really loved working with kids and teenagers. And that led to working with families, because you work with kids, you work with the parents and families. But kids, especially younger kids, have a hard time with the language of emotions and the vocabulary of emotions. And so helping them express themselves is a great thing to do with all these other modalities. And I just loved it.
Yeah.
I worked with kids in foster care for a long time. And I had some really tough cases. I had some very sad cases, kids with a lot of trauma in their background. And I just really attached to these modalities. And so then that shifted into, I do family law mediation. So I shifted into doing a lot of that work, which I still do, and leadership. And leadership just became a passion. I love the aha moments. I love seeing when people's eyes light up. And I literally, an hour before I got here, I had a client call me kind of in a crisis. And he's like, Dr. Barb, can you walk me through this situation? I need to write an email by Friday. And so I did a quick phone call with him. And he goes, oh my gosh, I feel so much better. And he said, boy, I really needed this today. So just listening to people have their aha moments, I think, is really critical. And so the leadership stuff just has been part of my life for a long time. And I just love working with leaders.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
No, and that's, so you talked a little bit about the language of emotion.
Yes.
Tell me more about that.
Yes. So I find that, we like mad, sad, glad. How you feeling? Mad, or I'm sad. We have such few emotions that we actually express. So that's something that became a big part of my therapy practice, even with adults, was learning how to express yourself. And obviously with adults using words, but being comfortable using the language of emotion. And that's hard for a lot of people. sometimes they don't know what they're feeling or what's happening, but helping them uncover, like, we can call that, we can identify like that you're disappointed, or you have a broken heart, or you're just really angry right now, and there's all these other things underneath that. And once people get that, it's a comfort zone, because what I find, especially working with executives, is you don't want to talk about emotions at work. And a lot of that I can trace back to, well, I've never talked about emotions.
Right. Yeah, we don't know.
It goes way back.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's a big part of it, is really helping people understand that, what are you feeling? It's important and it matters. We need to be able to share that. Again, that's kind of a vulnerability piece with leadership, especially, to be able to say, hey, I'm really frustrated. As a team, we didn't get this done. How can we do this differently, or how can we do it better?
Yeah.
And being able to talk about that in a way that kind of normalizes it, really.
Right. Without discrediting the leader.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's been such an interesting balance. Like now I don't remember if we were off camera or on camera, but when I was telling you about my energy, I'm a high energy guy. And I wear my emotions on my sleeve. And I definitely subscribe to the vulnerable, authentic leadership, approach. I mean, and in fact, I was talking about it on a podcast today, that a lot of it's been out of necessity. Mm-hmm. Once I'm an entrepreneur, there's no advisory board. There's
That's
no,
right. It's all you.
This is what you got, take good, bad, ugly, whatever.
Yes.
But part of that, like balancing though, the emotional side of it, and realizing that the emotions are real, they're valid and important, but then also not being reactive.
Exactly.
And I've been able to see that those gaps get bridged, of like, that it's still okay to, like, I don't have to have it all figured out, or like be always calm, cool, and collected.
That's right.
I definitely need to like keep the emotions in check. But I've found a lot of times sharing my emotion has made me a stronger leader.
Absolutely.
Because because it lets people empathize.
You took the words out of my mouth. And the other part of that is just the emotional intelligence piece. If we don't understand what's going on with our own emotions, we're not going to recognize or see what's happening in other people, because we're not in tune with what's happening for ourselves.
Right.
One of the examples, I specialize in conflict, and one of the examples I use is conflict. So if you're a leader who doesn't like conflict, and you see conflict going on, and you say, you guys take care of that, I'm over here. That's your stuff as a leader, instead of being able to guide people through the conflict. And that's important to look at that stuff. And we all have things, right, that we avoid, and I don't want to deal with this emotion-wise.
Right.
So if we can have that language and understand it, we're better able to be in tune with other people, to show empathy, and to just have that emotional intelligence and really understand, okay, I get this. I've felt that way. I know what this feels like. I know, maybe I can guide or validate this person because I've been there.
Yeah.
And that's pretty important.
So this will be a hard one, but I'm going to ask it because I'm curious. Is a leadership something you are, or something you learn to be? Like, are leaders born, or do you think that everybody possesses, the potential to be a leader with the right training and the right learning, that you can learn to be a leader? Walk me through just like ideal situation, generally speaking, obviously, but natural leadership versus studied and taught leadership.
Yeah. I think, we can learn anything in a lot of ways. Empathy is something you can learn, believe it or not. Like, if you don't have a lot of empathy, you can learn how to have more empathy. So I think leadership, there are some natural tendencies. There's always, I teach college courses, and there's always leaders that rise to the top in the class naturally. They take initiative, they jump in the class first. If there's a team project, they take the helm and they start doing things. So I think there's definitely some natural abilities for people. And then we also have the situation where people are put into leadership positions that either didn't want them or were interested, but they don't have the skills for it.
Right.
And those are the leaders that kind of flail a little bit, because it's like, I didn't really want this, or I was nervous about this position, and now I'm here and I don't know what I'm doing.
Right.
So I think it's a little of both. I think, and working with teens, I've run teen leadership stuff, and I want to catch them early. That's my goal is let's get teens learning about leadership early so that they can turn into adult leaders. Like they're the ones that are looking for, that's something that needs to be done. I'm going to do it and take that initiative and have that curiosity to go out there and change the world. Right. That's what we need.
Literally.
Literally. Yeah. That's exactly what we need.
Yeah. Not an understatement at all.
Not an understatement. We need them. So we got to start training them now.
There's a theme, and we're already touching on it a little bit with the empathy piece of it, but and you'll have to forgive me because I'll butcher my terminology, but capacity building.
Yes.
And I know that there's the empathy is one of those pillars of it. What I would love to do, I want to talk about capacity building.
Yes.
And I'd love to kind of unpack the pillars that contribute to it. But let's start at a high level. What is capacity building, and why does it matter for leaders?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because we talk about that in our book, and we use the image of like a milk container, and you have your little small, tiny milk container, and then you can grow it, right? So you can increase your capacity. And all of that is, a lot of it's leadership is a practice, it's an art. And the more, again, even just like we were talking about with emotions and the vocabulary, the more you do something, your capacity grows. Your container gets bigger, so you can handle more and more. So with leaders, I get leaders that come in with their little pint-sized milk carton, and it's like, this is all I know and this is all I can do. And then we start unpacking, like, how can we grow that? And again, it's learning how to communicate, how to be a better listener, how to really move your teams through conflict, like we just talked about a minute ago, how to show empathy, how to really be there and know your team members. That's how you can build that capacity.
I'm fascinated with that because it's been a great thing. I mean, it's been a blessing. But my business is growing crazy fast.
Great.
And so my business partner and we have capacity problems.
Yes.
And so one of the things we're struggling with, and one of the things we're learning to navigate or, doing the best we can is there's this incredibly demanding business that we've built that, is needing all of our time, all of our energy, all of our attention. And the nature of that growth means that now we have more employees, more team members and stuff like that. And it's a fascinating thing. So I'm so excited to learn from you because the workload capacity has had to grow. Like, in fact, we joke all the time that, if we got paid on production, be millionaires.
Yes, right.
If you broke it up hourly, it's illegal, both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
But, and then within there though, and then there's the human element. And it's like having the time and the space and the energy for, sometimes somebody needs to talk.
Yes.
Or, sometimes there's a conflict that takes half the day, but, it has to happen. And, so much of it for us has been out of necessity, but it's like, well, that can wait, I guess. Like now we got to have room for that. So that idea of expanding capacity fascinates me because I'm like right in that zone right now of
sounds like it.
Delegate, elevate, scale the business, grow. I mean, we're like literally in that moment, this chapter for us. And I've never contemplated it through that lens of an expanded capacity.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Yeah. And I think, the other piece that ties into that really well is that self-care piece.
Yes.
We use work-life balance, but it's really about self-care. And, one of the things that we're not the best at sometimes is saying, no, I just cannot, right? I just can't do that. I don't have the bandwidth to do that. And so helping people, that's part of the capacity. Like, it's like the walls of your little milk carton. You have to know where those walls are. And then, we can grow those walls, but you get to a point where it's like, I'm tapped out. And then you start brainstorming around, how can I help? Do I need more people? Maybe we need to shift. That's the innovation piece, right? We're being creative and thinking like, how can we work smarter, not harder? I know that's a cliche, but how can we work in a way that we're still growing in a way that we feel good about without burning ourselves to the ground?
Right.
Not working 12-hour days, 6 days a week, because then you can't replenish yourself.
Right.
And that's pretty key.
Oh, and it is so relevant in my world. And again, entrepreneur side of it, the buck stops with me. I mean, if I don't do it, nobody's going to do it, like that type of thing. And, one of the things we've learned that's been incredibly impactful is we're surrounding ourselves with amazing team members. Yeah. I mean, it was so fun before our podcast and you're like chatting with Ryan and everybody and, the excitement with the hats and all that. But, which obviously helps. And in fact, but it's been interesting, speaking of that capacity thing, I've joked, but I mean it sincerely. I've been able to outwork my mistakes to this point. But we're getting to the point where you can only work so hard.
That's right.
Like, I can mess up and work harder and, recoup it and whatever. But then it gets to the point where you have to learn from those mistakes.
That's right.
And then, build up from it. But that self-care piece, so it just, I struggle with it in such a big way.
Yeah.
'Cause I also take a lot of pride in being a helper. Like it fulfills me.
Yeah.
And so it's a double-edged sword for me because I like being the guy that's needed.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
But I also
it feels good.
But I also am so tired of it.
Yes.
So anyway, that like balancing of the self-care and saying no.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's really what a lot of people struggle with is especially if you are fast growing, it can happen so quickly that you're just like a deer in headlights, right? You're standing there going, "Oh my gosh, what's happening?" And I'm not able to function. So if you don't do the self-care, it's, I use the oxygen mask on the airplane. They always say, right, you put yours on first. If you pass out, you are not good to anybody.
Right.
So you've really got to learn where those limits are and always, tie back to the values, right? Core values. Like what's important here? Is family time important? I'm cutting into that with what I'm doing with this business. Something's got to change.
Right.
So really be aware of like, what are your values and am I compromising somewhere? And that burns you out pretty quickly too. Then you start feeling resentful and frustrated and overwhelmed because it's like, well, I don't have time to go spend time with my friends or with my family or do the things that I value most. Yeah. So keeping that stuff in mind is also really critical.
How do you, and I totally understand that from a self-care perspective, walk me through guidance or guidelines, I don't know, best practices or just tips and tricks for leaders listening that don't know what to, because we all struggle with the saying no thing.
Yes.
Like general decision making or, parameters around, first of all, when you should start saying no, like when, you should sense that maybe you need to start saying no more and which things to say no to versus which things not to. Any kind of big picture advice on that?
Yeah. It's so individual to everybody. I mean, it really is because what you value may be different for other team members. And that's where it's important to know your team and know what's most important to them. So, if somebody is, family is their number one value and they're like, I need to leave at 4:00 every day because I got to go pick up my kids and do this and do that. That's important for them. And so how do you work within the parameters of what they can do in a work day? So I think that part is really important. It's such an individual thing. Like I talk to people about mindfulness practices and taking deep breaths and finding things that work for you. The body is also a measure of how you're doing.
Yes.
That's a big one, right? The somatic piece. And so if you find you're flopping around at night or waking up during the night and your brain starts thinking about the business, that's impacting you, right? So you've got to make some changes.
Yeah.
So the body tells us a lot of things. A tension in our shoulders. All of a sudden my back hurts or why is my stomach hurting? I've got headaches every day. And we don't listen to that. We try to push through it. And that's where we have to say like, okay, put the brakes on. I've got to make a change.
Yeah.
And then you have to do it, though. Action is the hardest part.
Right.
We can think through things. We can write stuff out, but you have to actually make that change.
And then for me, it's so hard. I get guilt when I make the change.
Yes.
So it's so funny. You'll get a kick out of this. One of the coolest parts about working at Ascent Digital is we have work from wherever Fridays.
Oh, nice.
And it's a great perk that, the team gets to, and we mean it sincerely. Like, we don't care if you're at home or a campground or a hotel or here at the office or wherever.
That's great.
Work from wherever Friday.
Yeah.
And I've grown really fond of work from wherever Fridays because I'm the only one at the office.
Yeah.
And so I get, office time to work and, actually do it. But it's been, we're closing in on 4 years now. And I've been at the office every Friday for 4 years.
Yeah.
And I was sensing, that I needed, that I was overdoing it. Mm-hmm. And so last Friday, I decided that I would go work from the lake. Awesome. And, I'd connect to my hotspot and I'd sit on the sit on the table and do it. And I felt so guilty. I was like, everyone else is, I actively preach it. Like I want my team to go have this perk. And as long as we're working, it genuinely is fine. And I was working, I was getting my, I mean, obviously I've got plenty of work to do. I promise that's not a problem. But even I'm sitting up there working and I found myself like needing to justify it.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. And so it's just an interesting, like, I don't know. It's conflicting because like when you really do need to give yourself those things, it's a sacrifice of something,
right?
Whether it's performance or not. But I think the takeaway from that, and I've seen this definitely throughout my life, and you touched on it now, is that you've got to put on your mask. Like you have to take care of yourself so you can keep going.
Yeah. And we forget that a lot. And sometimes I think we also feel like, I don't know if I deserve this.
Yeah.
Like, why am I here? Yeah, I do that. I'm
like, I haven't earned it.
Do I deserve this? Yeah. Did I earn this? Yes. Yes, you absolutely do, just like everybody else does.
Right.
So you're giving everybody else permission.
But not myself.
But not yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, to say like, hey, it's all right for me to go work at the lake today. It's all good, right?
And it was so fun. I brought my kids. They were fishing. I was working, when needed and doing the bouncing back and forth thing. And it was actually like a really, I was proud of myself for doing it. Got it done. And I even, used it as an opportunity to make some content and like talk about the perk that we can work from wherever on Fridays and stuff like that. It's just that we have to, I think, especially probably most leaders, but entrepreneur leaders for sure, like have to remind ourselves that that there actually is a return on that.
Yes.
It just doesn't feel like it.
That's right.
Like I've seen that with my exercise.
Oh, yeah.
One thing I've been very good about is I time block exercise every day.
Yep.
And for some people it might seem excessive, but it's a non-negotiable.
Yes.
Like it's outdoors when it can be. And, it's like, I'm going.
Yeah.
I'm going on my, I'm exercising.
Yep.
No matter what.
Yeah.
So, I am learning a little bit.
Yeah. It's setting those boundaries, healthy boundaries for yourself.
Yeah.
Which is so important. Again, we forget that because as an entrepreneur, the lines are so blurred, right? Like, oh, I'll just work till 8:00. Nobody's here. I'll get some more stuff done. But in the meantime, what's going on back at home that you're missing out on because you're still here at 8:00 at night or on the weekends. So it's healthy boundaries for yourself because you're going to be better when you come back the next day.
Yeah.
If you come back the next day and you're all worn out because you were here for 12 hours, that's not helpful either.
Right.
Like, well, I'm here. Like, I'm winning the prize. I'm back again.
Yeah.
That's great.
I think it's Jordan Peterson, the psychologist. I don't know if you're familiar with him or not, but I read his book, 12 Rules for Life. And I forget the exact rule that it was in there, but what my takeaway from it was that his statement is that there's no honor in martyrdom.
That's right. That's exactly right. Do you believe it?
Yeah. Well, I'm learning it.
You're learning.
Because I've always been one of those guys that I'm like, I'll take it.
Right.
Like I'll be the martyr. You know what I mean? I'll be the guy that does the extra thing or works the extra, shows up at the late one and stays to the morning one, whatever, just to like, I don't know, with some justification maybe that it's strong leadership, but I think I'm, again, coming back to it's conflicting.
It is.
Because it does probably more harm than good.
Right. And as a leader, you feel a lot of responsibility.
Right.
Like this needs to run because I'm here leading.
Right.
And if for some reason something doesn't happen, then that falls back on you, or it may fall back on you, and then you're going to feel bad. You feel guilty about this other thing, but now you might feel other things may come up, right? Besides guilt. Like, oh my gosh, that's all my fault because I didn't manage all this other stuff.
And really what it is a sign of poor leadership. Like if you can't step away, you're not leading.
Right.
You know what I mean? You're grinding.
Right.
So,
yeah. And there's a fine line between the leaders that are barely there because there are businesses too where they pop in and out and they're barely there. Or some that are there so much and they're micromanaging and they're trying to control everything in the environment.
Themselves.
Or doing it themselves and not delegating and not really communicating with the team and stuff. So, so you have to think about who do you want to be as a leader.
Right.
And then and again, that ties in with your values and your passion for your business and how can I lead in an effective way where I'm still healthy? Because people need me.
Right.
But I can't be burned out because that's not going to help this business.
Right.
So it's hard.
I would let a lot of people down.
Oh, it's hard.
Because I don't have to just feed my family now. You know what I mean? I got a lot of mouths counting on this happening.
Yeah, no pressure, right?
No, right. So talk to me, coming back to that expanded capacity thing, and we talked a little bit about, well, we've touched on empathy, but I want to unpack that a little bit more. Talk to me about how empathy ties in with that expanded capacity concept.
Yeah, so empathy is really, again, understanding your own emotions and being able to connect. Empathy is connecting with others, even if it's just like, boy, this seems like a hard time. I'm just going to sit with you, and I'm here if you want to talk. And so that part of that is, your own capacity and your capacity as a leader. When you're connecting in with other people, they're going to feel that. That's empathy you feel it. And so some of this stuff happens organically. That's the magic of it. And so I think your capacity grows, the more you tap into empathy and the emotions, you're more aware of what's going on around you. There's an awareness piece to it. I'm always amazed when you fly and go through an airport, who's paying any attention to anything?
Right.
Everybody's, you get in your seat and everyone's got their earbuds in. No one's talking to you. Everybody's on their device. We're disconnected in so many ways. And so empathy is that connection piece, and that grows your capacity as a leader because you're aware, you're seeing what's going on around you. It's not like you got your blinders on and like, oh, I didn't know that happened in the office.
Right.
Wait, what? How did you not know that happened?
Right.
Nobody mentioned it to you, or you're not paying attention.
Right. Yeah. Love it.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
Makes so much sense.
Yeah.
You also talk about grit.
Yeah.
Tell me about grit and how it ties in.
Yeah. So perseverance and passion for long-term goals. That's Angela Duckworth's definition. Grit is hanging in there and being willing to do the hard stuff as an entrepreneur. No one's, you got all the hats on. You got your new hat, but that's your marketing hat, your HR hat, your training hat, your budget hat, your janitor hat. It's all your hats, right? So it's recognizing that it's like, okay, I've got to do all these things and moving forward. So sometimes it's like you got to dig a little bit deep to hang in there. And, they did a lot of research with the grit research. A lot of it's on kids and stuff and how they, how are these kids able to like hang in there? They practice, they try all these things a million times until they get it right. Like kids are not afraid to fail and they're not afraid to try new things and to iterate, which is really cool. We lose that as we get older and we forget those things as leaders. So the grit piece is so important because it's it's digging in and really understanding what's going to keep this going. And the belief that you can do it. We have the inner critic that tells us, you don't know what you're doing. Like, you're an entrepreneur. You have no idea how to market, be the janitor, do the HR stuff. And so you learn how to do some of those things, right? You learn on the fly. And that's the grit piece. And the more you do stuff, the hard stuff, then you can do it. And then when the next hard thing comes along, you can lean back and say, I had something similar and I did it and I got through it. That's what keeps you moving forward.
So what's the best way to learn grit or to practice it?
You got to just get in there. You got to keep doing stuff. You got to keep trying. If you give up, then you're not going to learn something.
Right.
I think of an Olympic athlete. How do they get to the Olympics? You didn't just go to the gym 3 days a week. You lived in the gym. If you're a gymnast, you lived in the gym 7 days a week. You moved away from your family to go train with the best trainers so you could get to the Olympics. That's serious grit, right? It's having a goal and wanting it so badly that you will push through the hard times, I didn't get enough sleep or, and again, there's healthy boundaries. So there's always that fine line, but recognizing that, if you have goals for your business, well, I want to meet these goals. I'm going to have to do some hard things to get there.
Right.
And you do those, right? If you really want it, you'll do those.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm curious about the kid thing. Do you have any idea why kids more naturally have it than adults?
It's so interesting. So there's a little team building exercise called the marshmallow experiment where you build a little tower and, they do it with executives and management teams and all sorts of people. And the people that do that the best are like kindergartners.
Really?
Because they're not afraid to try and do things, try a different way. We as adults were like, okay, here's what we're going to do. And you sketch it out. You say, I'm going to build this tower like this. And then everybody works on that. And kids are like, oh, that didn't work. Well, what if we do this? What if we do that? Think about, just when you're young, you're not as inhibited by, I've made a million mistakes now because I'm an adult. So as kids, we color, we do art, we play. I love watching kids in a store and they're like flitting around. I'm like, if we did that as an adult, they would think we were crazy, right? But they're not afraid to just try new things. It's an experiment,
right.
like doing something different. And I think as we get older, we worry about what people think about us or how we're seen, or, we can't do that because that's not what an adult does. And we say that we can't do those things. And that's where I think sometimes we lose the creative edge, is because we say, oh my gosh, I can't do that anymore. Like, that's not part of who I am. We lose the curiosity.
Yeah.
And kids are just naturally, watch kids. If you've got kids and you see kids at a playground, they will try all sorts of things, that you would not have even think about.
Right.
It's like, wow, that's pretty cool. Where'd you come up with that? Oh, I don't know. I just took the car and I ran it down the slide. Because
just figured it out.
Why now? Yeah.
Yeah. One of the best compliments anybody ever gave me he's a good friend of mine. He's a art designer. His name's Robel, but he said that I have grit with a smile, and I was like, and I loved.
That's great.
Because I loved the picture that paints of like the willingness to do the hard stuff.
Absolutely.
To push through, but to have some fun and joy along the way. And and I don't know. I reflect back, and I'm something about the way I'm wired. When things get really hard, I thrive, and I think I love running ultra marathons. I love running really long distances.
Nice.
But I volunteer on the fire department, and I'm an entrepreneur. All that stuff. And for some reason, when it's like, and I'm talking like the really hard, like digging fire line around a wildland fire or whatever, I'll be the guy that's singing a song and making it happen and whatever. And we won't have there's a whole nother podcast, but the nature versus nurture side of it. But I don't know if it's in my nature or if it's some of my upbringing or whatever. I'm grateful for it though.
Yes.
So I'm curious if, speaking of raising leaders and kids with grit and things like that, are there things that parents could be doing to help? Because it sounds like there's some level of natural grit with kids to lean into that, reward that, keep that grit mentality in our children. Because I think it's such a good trait to have. Again, with balance, of course.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. Is there ways that parents can, I don't know, encourage that with their kids or prevent the loss of it as we grow up or anything like that from your perspective? And I know it's not like a scientific, anything.
And I think, again, as we get older, so Angela Duckworth's definition is perseverance and passion.
Oh,
passion for long-term goals, right? So that passion piece. And I think of years ago, I had this video, I think her name was Bev Boss, that she ran this Montessori school or whatever. And it was such a great video because it showed a regular school and the kids are all standing in line. And then they're like, and here's Bev's school. And the kids are like, what? They're running around. And she said, that's what kids are.
Yeah.
Allow them to try things and to experiment. If they want to throw paint at the easel, why do we have to make them color within the lines? They're learning. That's growth in our brains. That's neural development that's happening. And so, an example I can think of recently too is I don't think they're teaching cursive writing in schools. Wow.
Right.
I mean, that blows my mind because there's a brain connection with that. And, everybody's used to doing this or on our phones. And so we're losing some of that, those creative sides. So I think, for parents that, encouraging play with your kids.
Yeah.
Instead of you kids go to your room and play because I'm doing blah, blah, blah. I ran a program for years and it was a family program. And one of the things that we did was we did a family activity. And it amazed me how many families didn't do family activities at home. They didn't even know what to do. And we literally would get big posters to color together or games or card games or art projects, whatever. And you should see these families working together. The dads were all in there and they were working together and they went, oh my gosh, we could totally do this at home. Why are we not doing this?
Yeah.
So having the parents be part of that play and showing the kids like play's all right, like, you know, and it's fun, you know, get your crayons back out.
And you're making me think about it now from a true leadership business perspective, because, you know, employees, it's the most challenging thing of any organization. And you want to give people space for work-life balance. That's and, right. You know, boundaries and whatever. But there's that idea of grit. And then I love that there's the caveat that of passion, persistence and passion. Because I'm curious, like, you know, every leader would love a gritty team.
I know.
I mean,
right?
every leader would love
dream, right?
Yeah. I mean, you talk about like the ideal situation. It's a team that just has the grit and gets it done.
Yeah.
It seems to me like the main variable there is passion. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious about leadership traits or, you know, tactics or things to be aware of where we can help encourage grit in our teams in a healthy way. You know, different than like the slave driver cracking the whip. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because like when you have we call them passion projects here. So one of our values at Ascent Digital is that now I'm forgetting the exact way it's worded, but it's basically that we jump at opportunities to combine work and play. Work and life.
Love it.
Like work-life integration instead of work-life balance. And like, so the point being, like, for example, Ryan, who you know, we've got a client, it's this beautiful luxury lodging place in the mountains. And there's an opportunity to do an overnight shoot and film and you know, whatever.
Wonderful.
So we're like, you should go, you know, bring your wife, you know, bring a camera, but go and do it and have fun and like whatever. Yes. That's an example of what we try to do with that jumping at opportunities to combine work and life.
Yeah.
Because what I'm curious about is if there are things like that then can increase the likelihood of grit. Mm-hmm. You know, all of a sudden now you get the employee that's not necessarily worried about if it's 5 or 5:30.
Right.
You know what I mean? I'm saying that like to way oversimplify it.
But
they're working. They're passionate. They've got the ownership. And any ideas how to identify that or how to lean into that with employees?
You know, the thing I'm thinking about too is, you know, with leaders too, I always talk about really know your people. And some leaders I've worked with, they're in businesses where people are kind of siloed. They're just working independently, doing their thing. And they don't really know each other. And, you know, it's that building connection. I think that's really key because you feed off each other, right? So that can help a lot and that can encourage that play. So with a lot of the leaders I work with, it's about, you know, really know your people. Like, you know, for example, we talk about like employee recognition and, you know, what motivates people and it keeps them engaged. And sometimes it is the fun and the play, or, you know, maybe we go out for a walk at lunchtime together and just let down for a little bit. And that kind of stuff, again, we get off of our computers and we get out in nature. I mean, look, we have nature right outside here everywhere. And to really lean into that allows your brain to just let down. And that's when ideas flow, is when you do those things. And so I think, you know, oftentimes I love the Friday, you know, thing that you guys have going because not enough businesses do stuff like that. You know, and we had the whole during, you know, COVID, everybody was home. But, you know, I think we kind of lost some of that when we got people back. Everybody then was just like in their own little world. And again, I'm kind of generalizing.
Oh, of course. And because it's such a balance. Like I love it when everyone's here.
Yeah. The energy.
We've got an open concept office. There's also tons of productivity benefits that you can pop over and say, hey,
absolutely.
What about this thing? What about, you know,
right
whatever.
There.
Yeah. But I also really am, you know, we try to hear what's important to our team. Mm-hmm. And I've got a belief that rich lives lead to rich perspectives.
Yeah.
And rich perspectives lead to rich stories. And stories help us be better marketers.
That's right.
And so we like genuinely want our team to live rich lives.
Interact.
Yeah.
Yes.
And like do the thing and make the memory and have the experience the other culture or, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
And so it's been, you know, like we talked about earlier, I have to learn how to, you know, how to utilize that perk too. But and I'm now you've got my gears turning on maybe like potential ways of concepts like that, but also now with maybe like a team building experience or create, you'll laugh, but it's serious. Sometimes we have a little quad back here.
Oh, that's awesome.
And there's a big fountain and, nice grass and trees and stuff. And we'll go meet. I'll have my one-on-ones with Ryan.
I love it.
Sitting under a tree out there. It's just different. It's a better setting. It's a little more casual.
Yes.
It doesn't feel like, the manager sitting across the table from you.
Exactly.
Or just by nature, pun intended. But you have to kind of like sit different in the grass. It's just a different.
The whole experience is different.
Yeah.
Right? It's more relaxed.
Right.
And then when you're more relaxed, the conversation changes.
Right.
And the connection changes. And again, that connection piece is key. And so I think that's where the creativity and the play and all that can come out when people can really connect. I mean, again, look at a playground.
Yeah.
Kids that don't even know each other, they'll start watching some other kids and all of a sudden they're all playing together.
Right.
And
they do it well.
And they do it really well, and they do it naturally.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And that's the part that I think we lose, because we have deadlines and budgets and,
there's work to do.
There's work to do, but we have to allow for that playtime.
Yeah.
It's not even a but, it's an and.
Yeah.
We have to allow for that space, that white space, to be creative. Like the Fridays is great. I mean, that's awesome. More businesses maybe can think about doing stuff like that if they're not already.
Right.
Let people have time to, everybody's brain works differently. Some people are auditory. They have to hear things. Some like music playing, some like quiet. Everybody's very different. So it's almost like leaning into their learning styles and how they function best.
Yeah.
And, there was how do schools kill our creativity? I don't know if you ever saw that.
No.
It was a YouTube, and I'm blanking on the Sir Ken Robinson, and it was called "Do Schools Kill Our Creativity?" And he tells a story of Jillian Lynn, who was years ago. He said she would have been diagnosed with attention deficit, but she was a wiggler. She moved around in class, and so the mom took her to a psychologist, and he said, Jillian, she doesn't have problems with learning. She needs to move. Take her to a dance class. And Jillian Lynn choreographed Cats on Broadway.
No way.
So it's a great video. How do schools kill our creativity?
Yeah.
And so it's the idea that like she had to, like some people have to doodle and some people are very wiggly. Well, are they attention deficit? We need to give them medication? Maybe not.
Right.
Maybe that's how they learn, is they function better when they're kinesthetic, their body's moving. So understanding that with our team, how people function best.
Yeah.
And you don't always know that until you have a conversation with them.
And you have to connect.
Yes.
Brilliant. Yeah. That creativity piece, it's so important. And I think we've got to be so careful to not lose that.
That's right.
And in the modern world right now with AI and technologies and all of that stuff, I just got done reading The Comfort Crisis. And one of my biggest takeaways from that was the lack of boredom now. Mm-hmm. In the literal instant that we feel even an inkling of boredom, we're on our phones.
Yes.
And we're robbing ourselves of opportunities to be creative.
Yes.
So he used a story, he used an analogy of like, evolutionary humans would be picking berries off of a tree, right?
Yeah.
And you'd get bored and you'd find a way to do it more efficiently. And you'd move to another tree and just pick the easy berries.
That's right.
So you get more berries, the trees stay healthier, you've got time to go hunt, like whatever.
Yeah.
If you didn't have boredom, you would sit and pick one tree to death. Like boredom is a tool for us that's necessary.
Yes.
But I think, anyway, it's good for us to be aware of that. But then, to your point, the importance of creativity. Because if we're not allowed to be bored, which from a leader perspective, there's probably ways that we can structure, boredom's not the word for it, but space for creativity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Downtime or, some format of that to let people thrive, I think.
It's the pause. People are not comfortable with the pause. And it's interesting. I was talking to somebody about dog training recently, and one of the most powerful things you can do in training your dog is pause. And we get in this like, leave it, stop, blah, blah. And it's like, let's wait for them to make a choice. Give it a second, give it a minute. Dr. Serini Play is, he's at Harvard, and he wrote a book called Tinker, Dabble, Doodle, Try. And it's all about this. It's that whole, and he's a neuroscientist or neuroscience guy, and it's all about really giving yourself that time for creativity.
Yeah.
Like your brain has to have that, and I worry about kids now that grow up on their phones. They're not learning how to write. They're doing math in different ways.
They're never outside.
They're not outside, and their brains are changing.
Yeah.
They're changing the development. So I'm so thankful I grew up when I did. Mom called us in when it was dark. Like, get inside. It's dark out. Like, no, Mom, we're not done. Yeah. We're not done playing. Our game's not over. And we don't do that as much anymore.
And I think, I love that the underlying thing of all this is passion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, without passion, there's no grit.
That's right.
And like, what are we headed towards? And that's where I think, it connects with, it ties in with that connection piece. One, we can understand what our team is passionate about.
That's right.
But secondly, they can understand the vision and the direction.
That's right.
And can be bought in on that bigger picture passion of like, why are we even doing this?
Exactly.
Where is this whole thing headed? What are we up to? And I think just even being aware of those little pieces, can be hugely impactful.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's important to not lose that, because I've seen teams start stuff like that and then they just fall back into the old patterns, right? Like any of us do, right? Like, I'm going to run a marathon and I'm going to train and I'm going to do all this stuff. And then after it's over, if you even make it to that point, then you're done.
Right.
It's like, well, you worked so hard to get to this point. Do you want to continue or not?
Right.
So that's the important piece of like knowing your team and making sure that you're still having these connections. Like, don't let it fall, and think about your company culture. What kind of culture are you building? What would you like to build? One of my favorite companies is Patagonia, first B Corporation, Yvon Chouinard. I think his business was the first with like a cafeteria and first with a daycare because his wife worked there and they had kids. And I mean, he just had this, and if the surf's up, let my people go surfing, his book, you go out and surf. Like here, this, powder day, you go ski.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be more productive and more effective when you come back.
Right.
Right. And to allow space for that.
Yeah. We keep the freezer filled with ice cream here, and we've got a playroom. Right, it's in your line of sight right there. But that's our kiddo zone.
Oh, I love it.
Sometimes we got to bring our kids to work.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but yeah, and that's the coolest thing about being an entrepreneur is that you get to build something around your values and your culture.
Yeah.
Like the things that are important to you.
Yes.
And then obviously you let it evolve and let it expand, but you bring people into that. And hopefully create an environment where everybody can thrive.
Yes.
Hopefully. It's great in theory, way harder in practice.
That's right.
But, the idea is there.
Yeah.
Talk to me about growth mindset, the third pillar of the
the key three.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's Carol Dweck's work. And a lot of her research was also done with kids. And the fixed mindset is, I'm not smart enough. I can't do that. I don't know how to do it. And you don't do it. And a growth mindset is, I don't know how to do it. It's going to be hard. I've never tried this, but I know that I can do it. I just haven't learned it yet. Her key word is that yet piece. And so, it ties in nicely. That's why we kind of connected the key three. It ties in nicely because it's all too often we give up. We give up on, I've never done this before. I'm not going to try. I'm afraid to try. I don't want to look like an idiot. Again, if we think about what we just talked about with kids, like they're not worried about that. They've got growth mindset all day long because
all day. Yeah.
But sometimes, we will see kids in school if they get the wrong messaging or, they see kids passing them up in their math test or whatever, then they might fall into that of like, I'm not smart enough, or I just don't know how to do this. And that can carry into adulthood. And then we turn into an adult that's not willing to try new things. So, and that's something, again, you can nurture in people. And again, tie that in with the creativity, and the passion. It's like, okay, we're going to try this new thing and I don't know how to do it. Do you know how to do it? Well, let's figure it out. I mean, we can figure this out. And if we can't get to a point where, a level that we're comfortable with, then we try something else.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's okay to try something else. And we forget that. Again, we just say, oh, I don't know how to do this. I'm not going to do it. So growth mindset's really important because it's that curiosity and it's that compassion for just trying something, even if it's, I want to learn how to play the trombone. Okay, well, I'm going to have to practice. I'm not going to get good at this. And then when you feel like, I'm just not getting any better, do you stop? or do you keep going?
Right.
Then you find a teacher, like, oh, I'm going to find a trombone teacher, and then they can help me move through that plateau that I've hit.
Right.
So, yeah.
My favorite job when I was a kid, I was I was a guest services supervisor at a golf course.
Ooh.
And
nice.
so we washed the golf carts is really what we did. But they gave us, I got autonomy and ownership of it. And I worked there for several summers, but they let us we started a detailing program for the members'
nice.
golf carts.
Great.
And we got a couple bucks from it and they made some money. Yeah. They let us help like inventory and organize the rental clubs and like all this stuff
Great.
And I've often thought about why I love that job so much. And I think that it's because it gave me room to grow. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't even necessarily in the way so many times like in our professional business culture, we think of growth as promotions.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And we pigeonhole it in and, you know, we're thinking, well, we're going to have to give them a raise. There's going to have to be whatever, the promotion and stuff. I think that I'm curious your take on it, but my guess would be that there's a lot of opportunities to structure growth mindset, growth opportunities that are not necessarily just, you know, that linear, like climbing the ladder promotion stuff.
Yeah.
Is that a safe assumption?
I think so. And, you know, the other thing I think about with it is, and I just said this to my client today on the phone about this change he was going through. And I said, instead of looking at what's the worst thing, I said, what's the best thing that could happen if this
What if it
happens?
works?
What if it works? Oh my gosh. Yeah. What's the best thing that could happen? And again, we deal with what's kind of right in front of us. Sometimes we try to go way too far out and that stresses us out and we don't need that. So really kind of focusing on what's the best thing that could happen in this scenario. Say we try something and, oh my gosh, like we have this idea for a new product and we roll it out and people love it. Oh my gosh. Or, I don't know if people will like it. So maybe let's think of something else.
Right.
Two different mindsets, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, we should just go for it. And that's what, right? An entrepreneur and having your own business, it's all trial and error sometimes. It's an experiment.
Yeah.
I don't know if people are going to like this or if I offer that, will people come? Do they want this? You know, have they thought about that? I don't know. You don't know until you ask the questions and you put stuff out there and then you see if people jump at it.
Are there ways to kind of help with that, help to encourage that growth mindset in a professional setting, you know, with team members and like, because you kind of talked about like fixed mindset versus growth mindset. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure if there's ways even to identify, you know, potentially somebody's tendency there. But I would love to know, first of all, if there is. And then second of all, if there are ways to encourage the growth mindset or whether it's like, you know, positive affirmations or whatever.
Yeah. I listen to language a lot. You know, what do people say? Like, well, I'm not good at spreadsheets or I don't know how to do those. Okay, well, is that something, can you learn that? Yeah, you sure can. So what if we set up a training for you to learn how to do these spreadsheets? You know, that might help. So listen to wording, listen to the language that people use because, you know, people with a fixed mindset have that like more finite language.
Right.
Like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know. That's too hard. You know, I don't know if I can, I don't have time for it. I don't, you know, it's all a lot of negative. Whereas with a growth mindset, like, yeah, sure, I'll give it, like a kid might say, like, yeah, I don't know, I'll give it a try. Watch their language or listen to their language, watch their body language and just see. And then when you see that, again, that's when you can challenge and say, can you think of another way to try this? Or what if you were to try this in a new way or a different way? Maybe this could change this whole project for you.
Right.
So asking those kind of questions and say like, I wonder if there's another way that we could fix this problem or another solution we could come up with. Can you think of anything? Like really just have those conversations where you get people to go, you know, because that also gets them to think about, oh my gosh, she wants to hear my ideas.
Yeah, they believe in me.
They believe in me. Like, oh my gosh, this really matters? Like, you want to hear what I'm going to say?
Right.
Because I've heard that a lot too on like feedback and stuff. Why bother saying anything? Because my leader's not going to do anything about it. My manager's not going to change. So why say anything?
Which probably comes back to the empathy piece too.
Exactly. Yeah. So really encouraging like, you know, I wonder if, or gee, I wonder if there's like, you know, another 3 other ways we could come up to do this, you know, that we could create that would give us maybe a different outcome, but it could be something that people want.
Right.
3 other products we hadn't thought about. Again, it's that curiosity, the creativity, and presenting it in that way. So listen to the language. Listen to how people communicate.
Yeah.
When they're given it, when they have a challenge in front of them. What do? Are they like, oh, right, I'm on it? Or, oh my God, are they rolling their eyes? Are they like, oh God, are you kidding me? Like, what are they saying?
Right. Yeah.
Because you've seen it.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm curious because, you get to work with leaders from so many different industries at so many different levels and all of that. Are there common struggles? Like, are there commonalities that battles that all leaders face, regardless of level and industry? Anything that you've kind of seen is commonalities there?
Yes. So my favorite story I like to tell is one of my clients, he's in the financial industry, and he called me one day and he said, I've got a promotion. I'm so excited. And now I've got this whole team of people. And so he wanted to find out about coaching. And I kind of talked him through that. And then he said, okay, let me get into the job first, because I don't really know what I'm going to need, what I'm going to need guidance on. And then, I'll call you back down the road. So I said, no worries. So I think it was about 6 months later, the phone rang and I looked down and it was him, and I answered it. And he said, I have no idea what I'm doing. I have no idea. And he was like so exasperated. And he said, oh my gosh, at that point, it was 6 months in the job. He goes, I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, I'm so lost. And I said, well, leadership is leading. It's about people. And people are not black and white. That's the challenge of it. That's why, emotions and empathy and all that, that's the connecting piece. And that's not your budget or your spreadsheet or your deliverables or your deadlines. People. You're dealing with people.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's difficult. So that's where, I do a lot of work helping people like dive into what's your challenge? Like, what's holding you back? And what are the things that you're struggling with? And let's figure out why that is. And again, looking at like, well, what if you tried this? Or, so I always try to ask a lot of challenging questions. I try to get people to think differently.
Right. So would you say if they're, leaders listening right now wants to improve, they've got a growth mindset, let's just assume. And there's the,
all right.
We start with the people element, like the connection. Are you saying that that's really the core of it? Like that's really the keystone?
It's the keystone, but you have to look inside first. You have to know who you are. And again, I use that conflict example of, if you're not someone who can deal with conflict, let's look at that. Because you're going to have conflict in your company, or you're going to have people that are going to walk in the door with their stuff from home. Something happened this morning before they came into work. You're going to have to deal with that stuff. So it's all like, what's going on inside? Let's figure that out. And that's going to help you, because it's amazing what comes out once. And again, I was a therapist, and that was, you dive into the old stuff. It's not that, but there's going to be some stuff from before that carries forward. And so that's the stuff we have to kind of look into and figure out, like, okay, let's talk through that. Let's figure out what's happening there so that you can be the leader that you want to be.
Right.
Not that I want you to be, but who do you want to be as a leader?
Yeah. Yeah. So start with yourself.
Yeah.
And really, you've got to learn about yourself as much as you can.
It's so important.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like the self-care piece we talked about, that's part of the conversation.
Right.
What are you doing to help yourself? Calm down your stress, work through your challenges. If you're flopping around 3 in the morning, what's going on for you? Let's figure that out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, for leaders, we don't realize how massively impactful that stuff can be, because, you've got the wrong mindset at, on the wrong day.
Yes.
The wrong adversity happens.
Yes.
And all of a sudden the tone is set for, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen it. I see it. So I've made so many mistakes. The list is as long as my arm. But
all of us.
But when I'm in the best place, it's like no problem.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the challenges
flow.
are just like, oh, we got this.
Yes.
Here's the plan. Whatever.
Yeah.
And then that ripples. And then I think you just end up really, honestly, at that point, leading by example.
Yes.
Not necessarily like, it's not that, there's this like formula or these tactics or anything. No. It's just that you're prepared for it.
That's right.
And then you got the space for the connection and the empathy and all of that.
Yeah. And to be vulnerable and, and to say like, oops, I goofed up, you guys.
Yeah.
I thought this was going to be a good idea. It wasn't. Let's rethink this.
Yeah.
Help me figure out how we can do this differently or roll this out in a different way. Let's work together And then that's building trust and respect and credibility. And, it's the open door. I talked with a leader one day and I said, do you have your door closed? Do you have your door open? Well, I have my door open, but nobody comes in. And I said, well, we're going to fix that. Like, let's talk about that. And again, as a leader, sometimes you're up here on this pedestal. Oh, I don't know if I can go in and talk to them.
Right.
Because they're busy. They're the president or whatever. But it's, once you connect and you get to know your people, then they have that comfort to be able to say, like, I need some help or I need some support.
Right.
So that's all that building trust. And again, you have to have conversations, the hard ones, the easy ones, all of them.
All of them.
All of them. Yeah, darn it. You have to do it all.
We have to have the hard conversation.
Yes.
I can't just do AI and,
Well, you can, but I'll know it's AI.
Right. Yeah.
I'll recognize that's not your voice.
Right. Tell me more about the book. Where can people find it? What's Tell me more about, resources for people too.
Yeah. So don't buy it on Amazon because as an author, you don't make money when people buy your book on Amazon.
Right.
So people can email me, barb@drbarbhughson.com, or go to my website. But yeah, send me an email. I always carry around copies and sell them out of my car if I run into people or at conferences.
And what I'll do too is I'll make sure to link it in the show notes and in the description of the show, so everybody can find your email and your website that way too.
Yeah, that'd be great.
It's awesome. It's so fun, Barb, to Dr. Barb. I apologize.
Oh no,
it's so fun to get to chat with you and
thank you.
Learn from you. And so thank you so much for giving me the time. Thanks for putting your insight down on paper. Thanks for regenerizing me at the end of a long conference day, and today at the end of a long work day too. Anyway, all of that to say, I just want to thank you so much. I've got a tradition here. I've got a gift for you.
Yeah.
And I think I got to get you a smaller size, but that's our Inspire by Example shirts, because you're inspiring by example. And I appreciate it so much. So anyway,
thank you.
Thank you so much.
This was great.
It's been amazing.
Yeah, thanks.
We'll do it again soon.
That would be wonderful.
Awesome.
Thanks.